Hello, everybody. My name is Ezekiel, and welcome to the SSEC show. Okay, slight mistake. This is K-Green89, and welcome to the AAC show. Common mistake to make. We had two games this week, both on a Thursday, where AAC teams went up against SEC teams. Got a little confusing for me. Sorry for the late release of this video. It's Thursday right now, so games are coming out now. But I've been having problems with the microphone that I just recently got, with the audio fading inside and out, like in and out. But I think I finally got it to a point where it's working. I'm not 100% sure what the problem was or how I fixed it, but I think it's working now. If it's not, then I'm gonna be upset. But without any more delay, let's get into the game. Let's get into the games. We had 2 days of games. Only games were played Thursday and Friday for the AAC. But it was 2 good days of football with some very good matchups and some pretty interesting some good results. First up, we have Kentucky at Tulsa. Kentucky 5-3 going into this, looking for that one last win to make the bowl game, going up against 2-6 Tulsa, last year's national championships, trying to establish themselves as the team they were when they did win the Natty. They've struggled to this point, but the team has a lot of talent still, and not out of it. They could still 100% make a push. This, I expect 100%. This is a down year, and next year they'll come back firing and be one of the top teams, and not just the AAC, but in the league. But we will have to wait and see for that. Getting into the results, Tulsa wins this one by a score of 33-19. And when you look at the score, just what didn't go Tulsa's way. Maurice Ecule, their quarterback, had a great game. 32 completions on 42 attempts, 261 yards, and 2 touchdowns, only being sacked once. Starting running back Brandon Pipkins, 24 attempts for 129 yards and a touchdown. And while Kentucky running back, their best player, Calvin Dupree, did everything he could to keep Kentucky in this game. It just wasn't enough. 22 attempts, 179 yards, and 2 touchdowns. But Kentucky falls short of Tulsa. And then you want to talk about Calvin Dupree. Not only did he produce on the ground, but also in the air. 14 targets, 12 catches for another 79 yards. And then Brendan Dominguez also stepped it up and put in a good effort with 12 targets and 8 catches for 151 yards, but unable to score through the air. Only have the 2 touchdowns from Dupree on the ground, and it just wasn't enough to match Tulsa's offensive explosion. So Kentucky's moving forward, trying to find that one last win. They've got very difficult games coming up. They need to find that one last win to become bowl eligible and win that 6th game. They got some tough games coming up, but Kentucky is a very good team. So I wouldn't say that they're out of it yet. But it will be fun to watch Kentucky, fight for a bowl game. But that sounds like something for the SSEC show. Sorry, I have a problem with my E's following my S's. That's something that they have to worry about. We're more focused on what's going on in our conference in the AAC. So we go over to our next game, the second game that we had on Thursday, and that was South Florida going up against Missouri. 3-5 South Florida at home against 6-2 Missouri, another one of the top teams in the SEC. And this one was a shocker as USF gets a 14-9 win over Mizzou. Also, I want to apologize. I'm talking a little bit louder than usual because I think it might help with the fading in and out. So if it's too loud, I apologize. I'll work on it for next week. Just let me know. But USF, great win, and they won this game. They stayed true to themselves and their style of play. They've never been a team that's going to kill you through the air. They've never been a team that's going to pick up a lot through the air, and that showed in this game with their quarterback, Kyle Higbee, 7 completions on 12 attempts for 95 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. But this is a team that on the ground is going to make you pay. And the quarterback, Kyle Higbee, showed that. Because on the ground, he had 14 attempts, 173 yards, and a touchdown. Kyle Higbee led this USF offense with 14 points in the second quarter, and that was enough to put them ahead of Missouri of a score of 14-3 at halftime, and then Missouri just couldn't come back, only able to put up 2 field goals in the second half, making the final score 14-9. Amazing game for an AAC team. USF really, showed what they were all about. Just like I said, amazing game. I'm going through these a little bit quicker because I want to get this out as soon as possible. But next up, we have Temple at Memphis. Memphis is 2-6, and Temple is 4-4. Temple is one of the better teams in the AAC, and they've recently been falling in rankings. Just because a couple of poorly timed losses. They have a real chance to bounce back against a weak Memphis team, and boy, this game leaves me speechless because, it's a game that you can't, no matter how hard you try to, you cannot hate this game. This game had everything. You're fans of defensive battles where it's just, two defenses, blow for blow, stopping the offenses, getting nothing. In the first half, the final score of the first half, 0-0. You like offensive shootouts, you should watch the third quarter, where Memphis comes out of the third quarter with a 28-24 win over Temple. And boy, if you like comebacks, you'll like this one, as Temple blanks Memphis in the fourth quarter, puts up 10 of their own for a come-from-behind 34-28 win over Memphis at Memphis. It's always difficult to get the road wins, and Temple played a great game. Memphis did too, but Temple just had that little bit extra in them to squeeze out a win in the fourth quarter. And when you get to stats, a lot of it centers around one man. That's Temple's quarterback, Levon Levine. 27 completions on 55 attempts for 506 yards and 3 touchdowns. And while he did throw 2 interceptions, the 3 touchdowns, more than made up for it. Brian Holsey, he had a quarterback rating of just .03 higher than Levine. So just shows how competitive this game was, even between the quarterbacks. 25 completions, 35 attempts, 219 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Holsey was sacked 1 time, and Levine was sacked 3 times. But, the air raid offense that Temple was running was just, it just clicked for them today. And then on the ground, Memphis, they prided themselves on a more balanced attack. Tyler Smith, starting running back, 24 attempts for 108 yards and a touchdown. Temple just didn't have any performance on the ground like that, mostly because that's not how they're built. They go for the air raid, and they go for the big plays in the air, and those were just falling for them today. This is a game, though, that had 4 100-yard receivers. Like I said, this game was impressive. This game had everything you could possibly want. Memphis had Ryan Forbes, who on 10 targets made 9 catches for 135 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's 15 yards a catch. Then on Temple's side, Tayshaun Hecker targeted 19, only made 9 catches, but 131 yards and 1 touchdown. That's 14.56 yards per catch. Matthew Cunningham, again, 17 targets, 8 catches. Couldn't make the catches that much, but when he did, he made them matter for 177 yards. That's 22.12 yards per catch and a touchdown. And finally, tight end Don Scott, who I think had the best receiving performance. 4 targets, 4 catches, 120 yards, and a touchdown. That's 30 yards per catch, and didn't drop a single one. Don Scott had a great game. Of course, player of the game has to go to Levon Levine. He was the quarterback, and he made everything happen. 506 yards is absolutely insane. But, I could talk about this game forever. 3 interceptions, 5 touchdowns through the air, 2 more through on the ground, and then on top of that, you have 2 fumbles. If you tuned into this game, you literally saw everything football had to offer. with the exception of a safety. And I mean, you even saw Memphis quarterback Brian Hosley drain 4 extra points, go 4 for 4, and Drew Tankersley was putting Temple in a hole. He missed 2 field goals, but made 2. One of those 2 made the difference. So, great game by Temple, great game by Memphis. Cannot wait to watch these teams, not just this season and next season, as they both showed an excellent game and an excellent play. Next up, we have East Carolina University at Southern Methodist University. That's ECU at SMU. SMU, using the air raid, and they haven't found too much success from it. And they found success today. They beat East Carolina as the underdogs coming in. SMU, yes, at home, but as the underdogs, only came into this game with 1 win, going up against East Carolina, who at one point was considered the other team that was going to make the AAC Conference Championship game. It was considered that it was going to be Tulane and East Carolina. East Carolina has fallen since then. SMU gets a huge win over them, winning 33-20. Tyler Graham, on 47 attempts, had 28 completions for 392 yards and 2 touchdowns. Though he was sacked 5 times, ECU did bring the pressure on him. ECU's quarterback, Steven Rivero, he's not one for putting up big yards, and you saw that in this game. 31 attempts for 16 completions for 162 yards, and he got a touchdown. ECU's main focus is on the ground. You see that Ryan Gobert, 21 attempts, 142 yards, a touchdown. So while he did fumble the ball once, the touchdown, I think, made up for it. Steven Rivero, though, also, this is the quarterback, keep in mind, on the ground, 11 attempts for 91 yards and a touchdown on the ground. So, ECU played a great game. SMU just had that extra bit inside of them. A 14-point third quarter is what ends up making the difference between these two teams. And then, highlighting some receivers, Adam Hansen, 7 targets, 4 catches for 107 yards. And Tony Cicero, Sam Carter, and Denzel Green for ECU, Cicero and Carter for SMU, were the 3 players who had receiving touchdowns in this game. Hard to follow up that Memphis Temple game, but it was still a good game between 2 teams that, maybe going into it, you didn't think was going to be a good game. It's kind of the moral of this. That's kind of the theme of the week. Some games, we had a lot of games that you did not think were going to be competitive games, and they came out being really interesting and really competitive games. Unfortunately, that is not the case in this next game. Navy at UCF. Navy on a 2-game win streak going into this game runs into a hot UCF who is, right up there with Tulane for the top teams in the AAC. UCF shows their dominance, 35-10. UCF does it in usual fashion. They got some stuff through the air, more than usual, with 36 attempts, 24 completions for quarterback Jonathan Levine. Got 298 yards, 2 touchdowns, but threw 2 interceptions. Then on the ground, Stephen Herder, who usually has a bigger role, on 22 attempts, Navy was able to shut him down and contain him to just 55 yards. That's 2.5 yards per attempt for a running back that's been pretty dangerous in this conference. And 2 touchdowns. They couldn't keep him out of the end zone, but able to limit his production by only allowing him 2.5 yards per carry is pretty effective, and I think that's a big win for Navy. Navy has some promise on the ground, though, with Donald Perkins, 16 attempts for 123 yards and a touchdown while he did fumble. And Benny Ramirez, he's looked better, but he has looked worse. 17 completions on 29 attempts, 111 yards, no touchdowns, and an interception. I feel like the difference maker in this game was how UCF usually wins the games. And, it's usually the difference maker in these UCF games. Sorry about that. Let's look outside for a second. But it's usually the difference maker in these UCF games, and it's UCF's incredible, and when I say incredible, I mean incredible defense. They've gone through the AAC, and they've just been, locking teams up. And, they pride themselves on defense, and it really shows. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Navy gets results when they find results when their receivers are making catches. And we saw the past 2 weeks when they have gotten wins, their receivers have been making plays and making catches. This week, just couldn't happen. Wes Osuna, 12 targets, 7 catches, 68 yards. That's usually their go-to guy at this point. That's their go-to receiver, and he was shut down. Nothing like materialized through the air for Navy. And at the end of the day, UCF comes away with another impressive win, led by their strong defensive performance. Now we get to the last game of the slate. It is Tulane at Houston, and what looks like an upset for some is something that coaches of both of these teams expected. In conversations with the both of them, they both kind of knew what the result for this game would be. Houston, despite being 3-5, is a very good team and shows up in big games, beating at the time number 6 TAMU, going up against 6-1 Tulane. The leader has not lost an in-conference game to this point this season, and they lose their first one here. Houston winning the game 23-13. Tulane getting all 13 of their points in the fourth quarter, trying to come back, but it just wasn't enough. And you want to. I can go in depth about this, about the brilliance by Houston. It was a great matchup by Houston, and while Houston did play great, I give most of the credit to their coach, Coach American. He wrote the book on how to beat Tulane. Tulane has only had one loss at this point, and that was against Indiana. And off the top of my head, I can't remember if they attacked me the same way that Houston did. But Houston saw my weaknesses, and to my knowledge, Indiana might have done it, and I'm just forgetting. But they are the first team to actively go out and try to exploit the weaknesses in this Tulane team. The offensive line does not have many pass rushers, so Bronson they sent the pressure. Bronson Morrow was sacked 5 times, and that really limited him, keeping him at 50% completion percentage, 19 completions on 38 attempts, 307 yards, and a touchdown. And while that is a good performance, this is the quarterback that usually puts up much better performance. Going to Houston's quarterback, he had a good game too. 26 completions on 36 attempts for 326 yards, no touchdowns and an interception, but he was kept clean. That's also a very important distinction to make. No sacks on Cawthron was part of the difference maker. But then you want to talk about, they knew what to attack when they were on defense, but what about when they were on offense? What should they go after? Well, it just happens that this Houston team matches up greatly against Tulane too, with Houston leaning on their rushing attack for the majority of the season, and newfound star quarterback, turned running back, Devontae Doyle. It's just a terrible matchup for Tulane's very, very weak rushing defense. Devontae Doyle, the plan was to just give him and backup running back Moses Walker the ball. Doyle had 38 attempts, for 233 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Moses Walker backup 13 attempts for 115 yards, no touchdowns, and he did fumble it, but still rushing dominant by this Houston team. That's where the difference was made in the game. And then I can just keep going. I keep saying that's where the difference was made, but you look across the board, they executed perfectly. Wide receiver for Houston, Michael Kirksey, had a great game, 9 targets for 5 catches, 135 yards. I think the biggest thing they did, shutting down MVP candidate who really dropped in the rankings after this performance, Fernando Thomas, as a guy who is usually, a guarantee, is usually guaranteed to go over 150 yards in a game. 8 targets, 5 catches, 68 yards. Not even the most receiving yards on his team, let alone the game. Which is he's usually a shoo-in to be the most receiving yards, in any given game. Being held to 68, where he's behind not only someone from the other team, but someone on his own team, that was a huge advantage for Tulane. The fact that Fernando Thomas was never able to get going. They got something working late, with Alexi Patterson catching a touchdown by Bronson Morrow in the fourth quarter, but it just wasn't enough. And you go down to this guy who I hate. Adam Edwards missed an extra point and missed the field goal. And while that's not enough, that would not have been enough to win Tulane the game. Maybe it could have shifted the tide, being a little bit closer. But then, if you want to say that, Austin Gore, Houston's kicker, missed a field goal. So there's no other way I can say this. Coach Marikin of Houston, it's a great team. He's a great coach. He has tons of respect from me. He, like I said, wrote the book on how to beat my team. So 100% props to him. I cannot even express how much respect I have for him. It was a great game plan. He knew what he was going to do going into it. I cannot wait to continue and go up against this coach because this is a coach who showed a lot of promise. And is somebody that when I see on the schedule, it's not just going to be a game between. I know it's not just going to be a game between the players. It's going to be a game where I have to, it's the players are battling it out, and I'm going to have to battle it out with a very talented. So, sorry to go on that tangent for so long, but let's get to the rankings. Tulane losing drops them to second as UCF reclaims number one in the AAC. They were number one for a while at the start of the season, then fell. Tulane taking their first loss in conference drops them down to 2. I feel like the sustained success of them over the season at this point, though, is not enough to move them lower. Temple with a good win goes up, and Houston with a nice win flies up the rankings to 4th. Tulsa with a big win. Tulsa and USF also with huge wins fly up the rankings to 5th and 6th with some teams that have looked really good at the start of the season, such as East Carolina and Cincinnati, being down now at 7 and 8 respectively. Then you have Navy, who is working their way up the rankings. Doesn't fall too much after a loss to UCF. Only Tulsa leapfrogs them. Tulsa leapfrogs them, but that's the only effect in their rankings. They move down 1. No one's faulting them for a loss against a really tough UCF team. And SMU moves ahead of Memphis after Memphis played a great game. They moved down to last in the rankings because SMU, the big win over East Carolina. A lot going on in the rankings. And like I say, despite what the records say, this conference is filled with teams that are pretty close in terms of talent. And Navy. I know Navy's getting a pretty good recruiting class. They're going to start moving up starting next season. Tulsa's got a couple of dudes that they got recruited that can really play. They're going to start moving up in the rankings. This is a very interesting conference, and maybe we came away with some wins against some of the top SEC teams. With some of our bottom AAC teams, maybe it's time to talk about: does the AAC deserve to be moved and be considered a Power 5 conference? Is there maybe a conference that's been lacking in production that deserves to be moved down to the group of 5? That might be something to consider as the season comes to a close. Maybe the SEC, because they were the one who let us go wild. Who knows? Let's get to recruiting, though. And I talked about 2 of the teams that got recruits because they've been building their classes and they've been making moves, and they got 2 of those teams that I mentioned got some big commitments this week. And we'll start off with Tulsa getting offensive guard commit Ernest Williams to come from Conroe, Texas, out of Oak Ridge High School. Balanced offensive guard, 4-star, B overall, C plus potential. And while academic bias is average, and he's apparently average in school, I think this guy might be a bit of a dummy. Affinity 1 is small school, while Affinity 2 is large crowds, and I don't see many schools where that would come into effect. But it doesn't matter how smart or dumb Williams is. All that matters is this guy is a beast on the offensive line. Pass, run, lead, whatever you want him to do, he will do it without any questions asked, and he will do it at a high level. This is somebody who's going to be very good for Tulsa. And very good as they got their quarterback of the future with Cesar Chacon. It's going to be a crucial part in keeping him safe and keeping him clean in games. They're going to have to start rebuilding that offensive line. I feel like that's, they got an inside linebacker last week. This team is making moves. They're making some nice little moves to get up into the, ranking. And just putting together and building a better class. Next up, we have Navy. Inside linebacking commit Timothy Johnson. This guy, he's known for one thing. Out around the rings of Florida, every high school coach knows this guy's name because he is a shut down run defender. If you're going up against South Sumter High School, you got to know that the game plan has to be we're going to air the ball out. We're not going to have a single running back touch the ball or anyone touch the ball on a run because Timothy Johnson is that dominant. Navy getting a huge commitment from that. This is a guy who's going to be a big impact. 4 stars, C overall, C potential. Bushnell, Florida. As I said, South Sumter High School. 6 foot 241. No one else was going after him, and Navy pulls off a really big commitment. And last, while this may not look as good as the other ones, it's a very crucial position. East Carolina University gets a punter. 4-star punter, Robert Workman. C overall, B- potential. Wants to stay close to home. He's from STEM, North Carolina at Granville Central. UNC looked at him at the beginning of the season. But ECU wants to keep him close to home, and they scoop up their punter. The first punter commit of the cycle coming in week 10. Finally happens. East Carolina gets a dude at punter, one of the best guys available. They don't move up in recruiting rankings because whoever is in charge of these recruiting rankings has so much disrespect for punters. Punters are people too. But looking at the recruiting rankings, if we go through and we look at AAC schools, Tulane, despite not getting a commitment and actually having a commit stolen, with wide receiver Manuel Hernandez, who went to Michigan, great get for them, and I, 100% am happy that I didn't realize another school was in on him. I'm happy that since there was another school in on him, it went to them. I just wanted him for media. But Tulane sits at number 3, moving down a spot from Baylor with their 5 recruits. They've got two 5-stars, a very strong recruiting class, but nowhere near the level of Penn State, and right up there with Baylor, competing for the number 2 spot. So that could be a fight as the recruiting cycle winds down. Then going down to 7, you have Navy with their 6 recruits. They got, like I said, that inside linebacker. They've gotten some an offensive guard, a running back, a quarterback. They've gotten a lot of good commits. Nobody really too flashy, but you don't need people too flashy. You need guys who can put their head down and play football. And Navy has gone after those kinds of guys, and that's why they're at number 7. Then at 11, they just picked up the punter. East Carolina at 11. Composite scored tied with 10th place Texas Tech. So I'm going to consider that tied for 10th. That's 3 AAC teams in the top 10 in recruiting. Come on. AAC is shocking everyone in recruiting, bringing in some big name players and, having some good classes, really good. And then you scroll down and I feel like they're ranked too low because they've gotten some huge, and I mean huge commits. Tulsa at 33, despite only having 3, that's part of the reason they're so low. They've gotten some huge commitments. Cesar Chacon, that offensive guard, and I believe an inside linebacker. I feel like, if they fill out their class a little bit more, they will be up there, top 20, I think, maybe. Like, if they fill out their class a little bit more, I feel like they could be a top 20 team in recruiting. And then if you go a little bit lower, not much, but Houston, not much AAC teams left. Houston at 42 commits, and that's all we have for the AAC recruiting. AAC, like I said, doing a great job recruiting wise. Cannot wait for the season to wind down. There's still a couple of guys that I know that some AAC schools are going after, that I'm going after, and it's going to be a little bit of a push and a race to get them to sign. Now, let's end. We're finally at the end of the show, and I'm going to get this out as soon as possible. But we're going to look ahead to next week, which has already started. And this is week 11. East Carolina going to Charlotte to play Charlotte in a game that, at the time of recording this, has already happened. But for sakes of not breaking it down like this, I wonder who's going to win. I really don't know. But so that's a game that already happened. So let's look at the other game. Um, and I'm not going to go in any particular order. I'm just going across on the schedule sheet that I have. Cincinnati at SMU. SMU coming off of a really big win and playing Cincinnati, a team that's fallen. SMU can make a big statement, grabbing their third win, and it would be their third in conference win. They can make a statement. Their season's done, but they can make a statement that really, you know, goes a long way their in the future of this program. If they can get a win against Cincinnati, who's a team that started off really hot, and maybe like if you look at their schedule, they got at Temple and Navy. They in these last three games, if they can go 2-1, I think that says a lot about this team. And just I think it's so much about this team and what they're capable of in the future. So cannot wait to see. Like I said, SMU, despite being towards the bottom of the rankings, still a talented team. I think SMU might have a chance. I think they might actually come away with a win. Next up, we have UCF at Tulsa. UCF trying to continue grinding. Also trying to capitalize off the momentum of that last week win against Kentucky. This game is going to be very, very interesting, and I think it's going to be a very close game. But I think, despite home field advantage, UCF edges them out and gets the win. Tulsa's had problems setting up their offense before, and UCF is a team that is consistently one of the best defenses in the league. And I don't know if Tulsa hasn't proven to me. They had a great win against Kentucky, but I don't think I've seen enough from them to warrant, saying that the AAC, my top team in the AAC, UCF, will lose to them. But I can 100% see, UCF losing and Tulsa coming for a win. So it's going to be a really good game. Next up, we have Temple at Tulane. Tulane with a disappointing loss. They're trying to bounce back. And Temple trying to go. They've got a real shot at the AAC Conference Championship game, but they got to go through Tulane right now. They have to go through Tulane, the second best team. If they get a win, with a little luck, Temple makes the AAC Conference Championship game. So that's going to be a very exciting game. I think Tulane might have the edge, especially being at home, but you never know. So keep your eyes on that game. That's a very important game coming down the stretch. Next up, USF trying to keep the momentum going as they travel to Memphis, who had a tough loss against Temple, where they looked really, really strong throughout most of the game. USF coming off of that big win against Mizzou. This will be a nice game because both of these teams showed that they are capable of keeping up with some of the better teams. I think USF gets the slight advantage and will take down Memphis at Memphis, but we'll just have to wait and see. Next, and finally, the last game that we have, Houston at Navy. It's going to be in Annapolis. Navy's going to try and bounce back after a tough loss against one of the top teams in the AAC. And Houston's going to try and keep the momentum rolling after beating the former number one in the conference and the only team in the conference to be ranked this season, Tulane. This will be an interesting game, but I think, despite it being a home game for Navy, I think Houston comes away with a win. That is all I have for the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Next week will come much earlier and not the day of, the first games of the week. Again, I really apologize about it. Try not to have this happen again. It was just technical difficulties with the microphone. I had some things that I could post it, but the audio was unusable just because it was constantly fading. So again, thank you for listening. Sorry for the delay. Thank you for sticking with me. And that's all I got for you. Cannot wait to be back in this chair recording next week's in just a couple of days. I'm really excited. The AAC is really shaping up to be a very exciting race as the season ends. So tune back in for one of, in my opinion, the most interesting end of seasons. And because the AAC's got a lot of drama and a lot of stuff that's left, on the field that still needs to be settled. So keep rambling, but I'll see you guys in just a couple more days.